In the late autumn of 1976, a narrow, winding road ran through a mountainous region in northern Nagano Prefecture. It wound through a dense cedar forest and steep slopes, passing through a small tunnel to the village. It served as the only route for schoolchildren, but the sparse streetlights made it dangerous in bad weather. A 10-year-old boy named Takayuki Ono, who lived in the area, walked about 2 kilometers home from school every day. On rainy days, the road became slippery, and his family was especially worried about him in the evenings. On November 23, 1976, clouds gathered over the mountains in the afternoon. The temperature dropped sharply, and school dismissed the children early. According to the teacher's records, Takayuki left the school gates around 3:30 p.m. That day, Takayuki was wearing a dark blue school uniform, a matching cap and coat, a black backpack, and a folding umbrella. This matched his mother's description and was recorded in the investigative report. The last confirmed sighting came from a shopkeeper 800 meters from the school. Around 4 o'clock, he saw a short boy in a school uniform walking in the rain toward the tunnel, but he couldn't make out his face. By 6 o'clock in the evening, Takayuki hadn't returned home, and his mother thought he might have gone to see a friend. However, phone calls revealed he was nowhere to be found. His father hurriedly returned from work, and after 7 o'clock in the evening, the family and neighbors began searching with flashlights. The rain continued into the night, the road was covered in puddles, and the gutters overflowed. The search concentrated between the house and the school, especially from the store to the tunnel, where residents called out to each other, expanding the search area. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, the broken handle of a black umbrella was found on the side of the road, 50 meters from the tunnel. His mother confirmed that it belonged to Takayuki, and this became the first clue pointing to the location of his disappearance. From where the umbrella was found, small tracks, washed out by the rain, were visible on the road leading to the tunnel, but they ended before the tunnel entrance. There were no signs of a fall or a downward slide, and Takayuki's trail disappeared there. By 10 a.m., the search had yielded no new leads, and the father reported the matter to the local police station. Police considered the possibility of an accident or interference and planned a major search for the morning. The next day, police and residents began a joint search, thoroughly searching forest paths, slopes, and streams around the tunnel. Nothing new was found, and residents assumed the rain had washed away the traces. In the morning, sniffer dogs were deployed, but the rainfall caused the scents to disappear, and the trail ended after dozens of meters. The dogs' behavior was erratic, and the team switched to searching the area until evening. The tunnel was checked for cracks, signs of repair, and leaks. There were no shelters or signs of a fall, and police ruled out the possibility that Takayuki had passed through the tunnel alone. The area in front of the entrance was the key vanishing point. On the third day, police and firefighters searched the streams and river, checking for the possibility of a fall or drowning. They found nothing hidden among the branches and rocks, and locals familiar with the area deemed a fall unlikely. On the fourth day, the helicopter flew over open forest areas, clearings, and abandoned fields, but found nothing suspicious. Weather conditions limited flights, and the search area remained incomplete. A week later, the search was expanded to a 5-kilometer radius, inspecting old huts and abandoned warehouses in the mountains. There was no sign of human life, and residents said it was nearly impossible to hide in these places. At the same time, police investigated reports of suspicious persons, but the information was fragmentary, with unclear dates, and the connection to the case was deemed weak. Without new evidence, the investigation reached a dead end. In late November 1976, the weather turned cold, snow was expected in the mountains, and the search became more difficult. Police scaled back their efforts, calling on residents to share information, and by the end of the year, the case remained unsolved. For several months, the family continued to search independently. In the spring, after the snow melted, they searched streams and trails and placed ads in newspapers, but to no avail. The community lost interest, and the family was left alone to grieve. From 1977 to 1990, Police periodically re-examined the case, but no new evidence or leads emerged. It remained in the archives as unsolved, and the old road lay deserted, overgrown with vegetation. In the 1980s, a new bypass road reduced the use of the old one, and the tunnel was almost abandoned. Police occasionally checked the disappearance site, taking photos and reporting, and the family visited it annually. In 1985, using new search methods, police conducted an excavation on a slope near the road, but found only traces of landslides and rocks. There were no artifacts, and the report found little connection to the case. In the late 1980s, the local newspaper reported on the case several times, and readers sent in information, but it was mostly rumor and speculation. The police investigated, but without evidence, the stories were shelved. By the 1990s, the area's population had dwindled, school children were fewer, and the old road was rarely used. The disappearance site became overgrown with grass, and police investigations were minimal. In 1995, the family's old notice was taken down as obsolete, and mention of the case disappeared from the local news. Public interest faded, but the family remained hopeful. In 1998, as part of a cold case re-examination project, police reviewed the case files, but the records and photographs were damaged, and the only remaining piece of evidence was an umbrella handle. Reopening the investigation was deemed difficult. In the 2000s, road repairs and landslide prevention measures transformed the area around the old road, but workers did not report their findings. Time increasingly obscured the traces of the affair. In 2005, due to expiration of the storage period, some of the archives from the 1970s, including the road data, were destroyed. This was later recognized as a serious obstacle to the investigation. By the end of 2010, the road and tunnel had fallen into disrepair, their use diminishing. Some sections were marked with restrictive signs, and the site of their disappearance became a desolate corner of the forest. However, in the spring of 2010, a road reconstruction plan in the prefecture resulted in the renovation of the old road and tunnel, unexpectedly bringing back to life evidence that had been forgotten for over 30 years. In May 2010, work began replacing the old road surface. While equipment was removing the top layer of concrete, workers encountered an unusually thick layer that didn't match the records and stopped work. An additional layer of concrete, exceeding the standard thickness, was discovered on a section of the road, containing a void within, a rare occurrence in construction. It was likely poured in the late 1970s, and the police were notified. Rotting fabric and metal debris were discovered in the void. Careful excavation revealed children's leather shoes and plastic fragments from a school ID card holder. Work was halted, and police cordoned off the area. Only a few letters and numbers indicating the year were legible on the fragments of the case. Police linked the discovery to the disappearance case and sent the evidence for forensic analysis. The shoes were a 10-year-old boy's size, and the stitching matched footwear of the time. Takayuki's mother confirmed their resemblance to his own, prompting the police to call an emergency meeting. The case, despite being deformed by pressure and moisture, after processing revealed the word "it" and numbers indicating the mid-1970s. The connection to the case became almost obvious. The investigation, comparing old maps, determined that the additional layer could have been added in late 1976 or early 1977, shortly after the disappearance. Police have begun an analysis, not ruling out foul play. Analysis of the concrete composition revealed consistency with materials used in the region in the late 1970s, but there were no official records of the work. This fueled suspicions of unofficial pouring. Finding the contractors who worked on the road proved difficult. Archives and newspapers revealed traces of small crews, but most of the workers had died or disappeared. Police interviewed 2 former workers, but their recollections were unclear. They admitted to participating in the repairs, but couldn't recall the contractors or the parts, which was of no help to the investigation. One worker mentioned he might have been pouring concrete, but didn't know the reasons or details. He said the instructions were verbal, but he couldn't remember the content. Police found no confirmation. Another worker suggested that there had been night work on the road shortly after the disappearance, but he didn't know the contractor. He mentioned urgent repairs, but didn't explain the reason for the thickening. Police examined administrative records of roadworks from the 1970s, but many documents had been destroyed due to storage limitations. Gaps in the records highlighted the discrepancy between official data and the road's actual structure. A search for former officials began, but most had retired, and contacts were lost. Those we managed to speak with didn't remember the details of minor repairs, but hinted that unofficial work was commonplace. Police noted that children's belongings in the void beneath the concrete indicated a possible concealment. However, without any other evidence besides the shoes and case, the investigation remained without key evidence. Analysis of the shoes revealed that they were likely abandoned on or near the road before the flooding. Given the wear, police suspected foul play or serious negligence and proceeded with caution. Police planned a mass survey of residents living in the area, asking if they had seen any suspicious vehicles or work 30 years later. People's memories had faded, and no new evidence emerged. Some recalled hearing the sounds of machinery the night after the disappearance, but the dates and details were unclear. In the 1970s, small-scale private work was common, and police were skeptical of these accounts. In the summer of 2010, police used 3D soil analysis equipment, but found no new objects. The question of whether the void was a mistake or deliberate remained open. At this time, local newspapers and television channels began actively covering the case. The connection between the missing child and the discovery under the concrete caused a stir, reawakening residents' memories and hope for new evidence. Local media coverage of the case prompted some viewers and former residents to share information. Among them was a former driver who had driven along the old road on the day of the disappearance, but his recollection was fragmentary, and police were unable to find key details. One driver recalled seeing something on the side of the old road the evening of the disappearance, but was unable to discern any details due to the darkness and heavy rain. He didn't recall any other cars, and police deemed his testimony irrelevant. Further analysis of the recovered shoes revealed that the sole's wear pattern matched the road surface of 1976. This strengthened the connection between the find and the case, but without further evidence, key questions remained unanswered. Chemical analysis of the concrete layer revealed additives used in the region in the 1970s, but there was insufficient data to pinpoint the contractor. The lack of administrative records proved a significant obstacle. Police reviewed the former workers' statements, noting references to night work and unknown employers. The possibility of unofficial employment shortly after the disappearance was considered, but remained a hypothesis without new evidence. Internally, the police compared the case to similar ones, confirming that small-scale, unregistered work was common in mountainous areas in the 1970s. This undermined the credibility of the testimony, but didn't answer the main questions. In the fall of 2010, further investigation revealed that the additional concrete layer had been poured locally, indicating either an emergency repair or a deliberate act. This drew further attention to the connection to the case. Police reviewed records of flood control and road repairs, but nothing explained the additional layer. Changes in work crews and poor documentation could have completely obscured these works. Police contacted several of Takayuki's classmates, asking if he had exhibited any unusual behavior before his disappearance. They all confirmed that he had been acting normally and had no reason to leave home. Based on this information, police continued to pursue three theories: accident, voluntary abandonment, and foul play. But 30 years later, the lack of a body, key evidence, and records made it difficult to draw conclusions. In 2011, growing interest in the case prompted some residents to share long-held suspicions. One recalled seeing workers clearing the road the day after the disappearance, but there was no record of this, leaving the connection unclear. Police, searching for information on small crews from the 1970s, found incomplete records of several companies in the City Hall archives. Work logs and orders were missing, and it was impossible to identify those who poured the concrete. Police checked records of minor accidents and landslide treatments near the date of the disappearance, but found only notes of repairs hundreds of meters from the tunnel, unrelated to the case. The increased coverage of the case attracted the attention of residents who had fled. One recalled seeing a truck on the old road the winter after the disappearance, but the dates didn't match, and police ruled out any connection. In the second half of 2011, a re-examination of the shoes revealed minor scratches on the soles caused by intense pressure. These were difficult to explain by an accidental fall, adding further questions to the investigation. Analysis of fragments of the plastic case confirmed that it had been exposed to pressure and moisture, indicating that concrete had been poured shortly after the disappearance. A connection to the work became inevitable, but evidence was lacking. Police re-examined traffic records from the day of the disappearance, as well as bus and patrol schedules, but found no officially registered vehicles. The possibility of unregistered vehicles remained unproven. Elderly residents interviewed also mentioned seeing a light resembling headlights at night, shortly after the disappearance. They couldn't remember the exact time, and nighttime driving was common in the 1970s, so their testimony was not confirmed. In 2012, police temporarily expanded their investigation team, continuing to analyze concrete debris and shoe prints, but no new findings were made, and key questions remained unanswered. The local newspaper launched a series of articles about the case, describing the family's emotions and the changing location of the disappearance. This revived public interest and highlighted the case's impact on the region. In the second half of 2012, the police used technology to re-examine the road, studying the underground structures, but found nothing but the shoes and the case, and the cause of the void remained unclear. The investigation confirmed that the additional layer had been poured locally and differed from the standard design. This indicated urgent or non-standard work, but a connection to the disappearance of 1976 remained unconfirmed. The police collected surviving documents from the 1970s, old newspapers and community records, but there was no mention of major construction after the disappearance. Residents' testimony remained the only, albeit unreliable, source. In 2013, on the anniversary of the disappearance, the family laid flowers at the site. The road had already become overgrown with grass, and the tunnel had lost its former appearance as a school route. Time increasingly obscured the traces of the past. At this time, journalists were actively investigating the case, interviewing residents and analyzing records. Their work revived interest, examining the case from new angles, but no key evidence emerged. One journalist noted weather records from the day of the disappearance. The Weather Service confirmed heavy rain and a sharp cold snap, which explained the loss of the footprints, but not the discovery of the shoes and case under the concrete. During the investigation, the journalist found residents who had witnessed nighttime roadworks weeks after the disappearance. Their memories were vague, but the coincidence of dates made this an important clue, recorded as a possible lead. The journalist researched the road's usage history and learned that its popularity had plummeted in the late 1970s and early 1980s, with restrictions imposed on some sections. This could have been due to the pouring of the roadbed, so he requested an expert opinion. Further analysis revealed that the concrete layer's materials matched those found in local quarries dating back to the 1970s, reinforcing the likelihood of work occurring shortly after the disappearance. The coincidence with the case seemed increasingly less coincidental. The journalist's article sparked public debate, and residents began recalling details of that era. Some avoided sharing vague memories, but the case began to be perceived as a mystery with disturbing details. In 2014, university researchers and construction experts joined the case, studying the process of pouring the additional layer. However, the exact cause or perpetrators could not be determined. One expert suggested that the layer was poured under unusual conditions in a short time, but this did not explain the presence of the shoes and case, and the hypothesis remained unconfirmed. The journalist interviewed former community members, learning of discussions about road repairs, but the dates and details were unknown. The minutes from those years have not survived, highlighting the problem of lost records. Police continued interviewing elderly residents of the area. One mentioned seeing a light at night shortly after the disappearance, but didn't know whether it was a car or a street light. The statements were recorded, but they were of no use to the investigation. The constant coverage of the case rekindled residents' memories of Takayuki. Some shared stories about school events or the road, but these provided no clues. Interviews with school staff confirmed that there was a great deal of chaos on the day of the disappearance due to the children's sudden early dismissal. This explained the lack of witnesses, but offered no clue. In 2015, a journalist obtained the teacher's diary, describing difficult weather and an early vacation on the day of his disappearance. Takayuki's behavior was normal, but the chaos of the day could have made it difficult to track him down. The diary noted that checking the children at the exit was complicated by rain and umbrellas obscuring their faces. This explained the difficulties of the early search and why the disappearance was not immediately noticed. Forest authorities reported that wild animal tracks had become more frequent in the area around the time of the disappearance, but rain washed away the evidence. A connection to the case was not confirmed, and the weather complicated the search. In 2016, a journalist published a lengthy article describing the case and the discovery of the shoes and case. This caused a stir, and the loss of documents and unregistered works became a matter of public interest. In the second half of 2016, the article attracted the attention of researchers and journalists from other regions. They studied the road's structure and construction processes, but found no clear answer about the layer. Some experts, given the realities of the 1970s, suggested that due to a labor shortage, minor repairs often went undocumented. But this didn't explain why the shoes and case ended up in the layer. Interviews with a former official responsible for the road confirmed that minor repairs were often carried out without documentation, but no one remembered the details or contractors. A connection to the case remained unproven. A journalist examined traffic data and confirmed that by the 1970s, the old road was already losing its popularity, and there were almost no cars on rainy days. This explained the lack of witnesses, but not the discovery under the concrete. The police commissioned an external lab to retest the shoes and case. The lab confirmed their prolonged underground presence, but did not answer whether they were intentionally buried or accidentally. The unusual shape of the void in the layer was once again noticed. It was suggested that something had interfered during the pouring process, or that the void had been created intentionally, but without new evidence, this remained a theory. Among the elderly residents, there were those who saw a parked car on the road shortly after the disappearance, but the descriptions were vague and the type of car or number of people present were not specified, which reduced the value of the testimony. In 2017, a documentary about the case sparked renewed interest. Police received calls from people recalling old details, but nothing concrete or conclusive emerged. The film sparked discussion about document storage. Experts pointed out that the loss of the records seriously hampered the investigation, and the social context of the case became a subject of debate, but no answers emerged. Influenced by public interest, the family asked the police to continue their investigation based on new evidence. However, without fresh evidence, the investigation remained limited, requiring a cautious approach. In the second half of 2017, as part of a renewed investigation, police re-examined documents related to the pouring of the additional concrete layer. They found evidence of several unregistered minor repairs dating back to the late 1970s, but the participants and details could not be identified. To confirm the timing of the work, the journalist sent samples of sand and aggregate from the concrete layer to a lab. Analysis revealed that the materials likely came from local quarries, but it was impossible to determine who carried out the work. Police attempted to gather data on the behavior of residents who used the old road during those years, interviewing children and adults who walked there. But the memories faded, and no new evidence of the crime emerged. The investigation compiled a chronology of the events of the day of the disappearance, clarifying the weather conditions, the time of leaving school, and witness statements. The break in the tracks before the tunnel again confirmed that this was the key location. The reasons for the disappearance of the tracks before the tunnel were divided into three theories: rainwash, abandonment, or intervention. But none of them explained why the shoes and case ended up under the concrete. In 1976, the tunnel was almost completely unlit, and in the rain, visibility was reduced to a few meters, which was dangerous for a child. Police attempted to recreate the nighttime conditions, but found no new clues. A review of old investigative notes revealed crime scene diagrams and search logs, where the break in the tracks before the tunnel was already considered crucial. But Takayuki's subsequent path remained unknown. In 2018, police found an unconfirmed report in the archives of an engine sound near the tunnel the night after the disappearance. The exact date and description of the vehicle were missing, reducing the value of the data. The journalist interviewed former truck drivers who frequently used the old road. They noted that the weather that day could have triggered accidents or work, but they had no specific recollections related to the incident. The journalist continued to focus on the discovery of the shoes and case, collaborating with experts to identify anomalies in the concrete pouring process. He emphasized that the lack of documentation increased the likelihood of foul play. In the second half of 2018, a local television program covered the case again, and the discovery of the shoes buried under the concrete attracted attention. Viewers shared their recollections, but they were too fragmentary for the investigation. After the broadcast, several former workers mentioned possible involvement in night repairs in the late 1970s, but they couldn't recall the contractors or the targets. This didn't establish a connection to the case. The police continued searching for documents in the city hall and old administrative buildings, but most of the records from the 1970s were destroyed. The remaining fragments contained no information about the additional layer. The journalist examined the traffic conditions on the road and confirmed that in the 1970s it was already a secondary road, and on rainy days there were almost no cars. This explained the lack of witnesses, but not the discovery under the concrete. Additional interviews with school staff revealed that on the day of the disappearance, there was a commotion at the gates due to the unexpected vacation and rain. This could explain why the children were not immediately accounted for. The search that day was complicated by rain and umbrellas obscuring faces, causing confusion. This explains why Takayuki's disappearance was not immediately noticed, complicating the early search. In 2019, a journalist published an article in a national newspaper, again linking the discovery under the concrete to the disappearance. Discussion of lost documents and unregistered works attracted attention. Prompted by the article, police temporarily expanded their investigation team, focusing on the time of the pouring, the circumstances of the discovery, and possible investigations. But without new evidence, the investigation remained at a dead end. A retest of the shoes revealed that soil particles in the fabric matched the road's soil, confirming they had been there before the pouring. But who placed them there, and how remained unclear. One elderly resident claimed to have seen an unfamiliar car on the road the winter after his disappearance. However, he couldn't remember the type of car or the people involved, and the police deemed this unreliable. In the second half of 2019, a journalist organized a meeting with experts to discuss the process of filling the layer. Everyone agreed that its purpose was unclear, and the presence of the objects made the case unique. One expert suggested that the layer was poured under unusual conditions in a short time, but an accidental inclusion of the items was considered unlikely, again raising the question of intent. The police found another former worker, possibly involved in the repairs in the 1970s, but he didn't remember working on that road and knew nothing about the additional layer. His testimony was of no help. Records of minor repairs dating back to the late 1970s were found in the archives, but these concerned sections far from the tunnel, and the materials differed from the original layer. This remains for reference purposes. Rumors circulated among residents about the noise of machinery the night after the disappearance. The coincidence of dates sparked interest, and the journalist collected testimony, attempting to connect it to the investigation. Police reviewed records of landslides and minor avalanches in the area, confirming their presence at the time, but deemed a connection to the layer filling unlikely. The case remains unconfirmed. In early 2020, a national newspaper again covered the case, highlighting the loss of documents and unregistered works. This sparked a public outcry and renewed requests for an investigation. The case became a major topic in the region, but the family, laying flowers at the scene of the disappearance, faced a reality where time had erased traces. They begged the police to press on, believing in the truth. Police collected old photos and amateur videos of the road and tunnel for reconstruction, but found no significant materials. The loss of the footage became another obstacle. In the spring of 2020, a construction expert suggested the void in the layer might have been intentional, but he didn't explain why only the shoes and case were found there. This heightened interest in the case. In the summer of 2020, a volunteer group from the regional archives found records of temporary roadworks from the late 1970s, but without any indication of the contractor or purpose. Police recorded this as background information. A journalist checked the local quarry's ledgers and confirmed that the concrete and materials matched the layer found. But without a contractor identified, the findings remained hypothetical due to the loss of documents. Experts reiterated that the void in the layer could not have arisen by chance, suggesting either an obstruction during the filling or a deliberate creation of the space. The lack of other finds hampered analysis. A campaign for a reinvestigation began in the region, with residents demanding that the unclear nature of the unregistered work be addressed before the road was demolished. Authorities promised to review the old records, but nothing came of it. In 2021, the mayor's office conducted a survey of the terrain around the road, discovering traces of small landslides dating back to the late 1970s. But this was not connected to the layer being poured or the case. The police interviewed the former workers again, but their memories had become even more fuzzy. References to night work became increasingly vague and, without specifics, remained mere background information. In the fall of 2021, the local newspaper published a new article, systematizing the case and the mystery of the layer. The discovery of the shoes was emphasized as a key element, eliciting a public response. The article highlighted the problem of lost documents from the 1970s, which meant that unregistered works made it impossible to rule out foul play. This again highlighted the unsolved nature of the case. Police re-examined the road's underground structures, but made no new discoveries. The question of whether the layer was connected to the case remained unanswered. A journalist and experts attempted to recreate the concrete pouring process under 1970s conditions, but without the original equipment and materials, the conclusions were limited, and the mystery remained unsolved. In 2022, police digitized old search logs and maps, preserving the data. However, the lack of detailed records of the work limited the analysis. That same year, the local museum organized an exhibition about the region's unsolved cases, including Takayuki's disappearance. The shoes, case, photos, and articles amazed visitors, highlighting the complexity of the case. The exhibition revived debate about the importance of document preservation. The loss of the 1970s records was considered the main reason for the lack of a solution, but the investigation itself stalled. The journalist interviewed the families of former contractors, looking for old logs or receipts, but all the documents had been destroyed, and there were no traces of the work on the road. Police found 2 more people possibly connected to the renovations of 1970, but they couldn't remember the details. References to the work were recorded without confirmation. Stories were circulating among residents about a light similar to work lanterns the night after the disappearance. There was a coincidence of dates, but without further details, police considered this unreliable. At the end of 2022, a journalist compiled a chronology of changes to the road and tunnel, attempting to visualize the changes in the relief. but a connection with the filling of the layer remained impossible due to the loss of documents. In 2023, police created a digital archive of the case, organizing records, testimony, and articles, but the loss of documents from the 1970s remained a major problem. That year, the family laid flowers at the site, accepting that 47 years had passed without an answer. But they believed in the remote possibility of truth and cooperated with the police. The public expressed dissatisfaction with the case's lack of resolution, arguing that the unregistered works were the key to solving the mystery. But without documentation, this remained a hypothesis. In the second half of 2023, police, with the help of experts, attempted to determine the exact time the additional concrete layer was poured. Analysis revealed that the materials were likely delivered in the late 1970s, but the contractors or clients could not be identified. The journalist found a former driver who transported materials in the area. He recalled that shortly after the disappearance, part of the road became muddy, but he didn't know if it was due to the concrete, so his account was recorded as background information. Another driver claimed to have seen a man in work clothes on the road one morning a few weeks after the disappearance, but due to the rain and distance, he couldn't see his face or details. Police deemed this unreliable. A check of land records revealed that construction traffic on the old road temporarily increased in the late 1970s. However, without specifying the purpose or the contractor, this merely confirmed the existence of unregistered work. The journalist examined records of private forest lands around the road, but the documents from the 1970s had been lost, and no records of work or land use could be found. Police recreated the conditions of the day of the disappearance by re-examining the scene. It was confirmed that the heavy rain had quickly washed away the footprints in the ground, but this did not explain the discovery of the shoes under the concrete. In 2024, the mayor's office announced the reconstruction of the old road, but a full excavation of the layer was rejected due to the cost and risks. The investigation was limited to a partial survey. A partial excavation confirmed the unevenness of the layer and differences from the standards of the 1970s, but there were no new finds, and the question of whether the void was intentional remained unanswered. Residents, speaking to a journalist, expressed regret that the loss of the documents had prevented the case from being solved. They believed that complete records could have explained the reason for the flooding and its connection to the disappearance. In the second half of 2024, a national newspaper published an article describing the discovery of the shoes and case as a unique case. The loss of documents and unregistered works became a public issue. At the beginning of 2025, the police conducted an inspection of the roadware and layer boundaries, but found no new items, and the circumstances of the discovery of the shoes remained unexplained. A geological survey of the tunnel revealed minor ground movements in the late 1970s, but their connection to the filling or the case was not confirmed, remaining a hypothesis. Local volunteers, by digitizing old newspapers and documents, attempted to preserve the region's history. But the loss of records from the 1970s continued to hinder the investigation. Police re-examined the surviving shoes and case, improving their storage, but the new analysis yielded no data due to the materials having been damaged by time, and the mystery remained unsolved. On the anniversary of the disappearance in 2025, a journalist compiled all the records for a long article. He emphasized that the loss of the documents and their discovery under the concrete made the case an unsolved mystery. The long period of secrecy prompted mixed reactions in the community. Some residents remembered the case clearly, while others said time had erased the details, leaving it a part of local legend. In the spring of 2025, the family, as usual, laid flowers at the scene of the disappearance. They accepted that time was complicating the search for the truth, but they remained hopeful and cooperated with the police. The local newspaper began a series of articles about the history of the road and tunnel, linking them to the case. They emphasized that the loss of documents from the 1970s was the main obstacle. Authorities continued work to fortify the region, but without evidence linking it to the case, they were unable to explain the layer's placement. The issue of lost documents once again drew attention. In the summer of 2025, the museum organized a small exhibition about the case. Photos of the shoes, the case, the map, and old articles presented visitors with a concrete mystery. While preparing the exhibition, museum staff found several photographs of the road from the late 1970s, but there were no traces of work, so they were used as reference materials. After the exhibition, police checked the new evidence, but residents' accounts of the era were too fragmentary to help solve the mystery. The journalist visited the exhibition and wrote an article about how the case remains etched in the region's memory. He noted that fragmentary testimony and lost documents hinder the search for the truth. An inspection of the site revealed that the vegetation around the tunnel had grown significantly, and the terrain had changed compared to 1976. This complicated the reconstruction of events. Police revisited the discovery site, examining the structure, and confirmed that the items were located in a confined area. This reduced the likelihood of accidental impact with the concrete, strengthening the theory of foul play. Given the almost complete lack of records of work, the investigation examined construction practices from the 1970s. Minor, unregistered repairs were common, but the connection to the case remained unclear. In mid-2025, police held an internal meeting to review the theory that the disappearance had been fouled, but without new evidence, no conclusions could be reached. The journalist, having learned of the meeting, re-examined the impact of the document loss, interviewing residents and museum archives. He wrote an article calling for the preservation of the case's memory for future generations. Despite these efforts, the case remained unsolved for 49 years, and the shoes and case buried under the concrete continued to be a mystery, deepened by the loss of documents. In the fall of 2025, the local newspaper published a new article, systematizing the progress of the case and the mystery of the layer. The discovery of the shoes was once again emphasized, provoking a public response. The article described the details of the discovery, the difficulties of the early search due to rain, and the loss of evidence. But the unique discovery of objects buried under concrete remained an unexplained mystery. The journalist published a photo of the shoes, asking readers how they ended up buried under the concrete. Many criticized the loss of the documents, emphasizing the importance of preserving them. Police urged residents to share information, releasing additional weather and traffic data on the day of the disappearance, but there was no information about the layer being filled. A re-examination of the shoes confirmed that the scratches on the soles matched the road surface, but how they had been covered up was not explained, and the theory of foul play was again discussed. Elderly residents mentioned seeing a light like headlights the night after the disappearance, but the memories were too vague to specify the time or location, and police only wrote it down. The journalist prepared a lengthy article with expert commentary, describing the progress of the case and the mystery of the layer. He emphasized that even 49 years later, the discovery beneath the concrete remains crucial. In the winter of 2025, the last inspection of the road and tunnel confirmed their deterioration. The structure of the layer remained a mystery, and no new discoveries were made. That year, the family laid flowers, accepting the lack of response, but asking that the matter not be forgotten, bearing the weight of decades. The case remained unsolved, and the shoes and case buried under the concrete were the only evidence hiding Takayuki's fate in the silence of the rain and the old road. In early 2025, the importance of document preservation was discussed. The loss of records was emphasized as the main reason for the failure to solve a case. The journalist conducted extensive interviews with residents who frequently walked the road during those years, collecting recollections of its condition and the work being carried out. However, the testimony was fragmentary and did not indicate the filling of a new layer. The police examined contractor registers from the 1970s, but most of the companies had closed and the owners had died. No documentation of work or contracts was found. One builder mentioned that a local warehouse in the late 1970s used materials similar to layer concrete, but did not specify the location or purpose. In 2025, the newspaper republished the article, highlighting the discovery of the shoes and case and the loss of the documents. Readers called for the story to be preserved for future generations. A journalist and experts reviewed the requirements for concrete pouring in the 1970s, confirming that the void in the layer required intention or rare conditions. Police used a new method to analyze microparticles on the shoes, but only confirmed the known connection to the road surface, and no new data emerged. Some residents proposed a full survey of the road before closing it, but authorities rejected this due to budget and risk, and the discovery under the concrete remained the only clue. As the anniversary of the disappearance approached, the family expressed fear that the case would be forgotten, but their determination to find the truth remained undiminished, and they asked for new evidence. The case remained a mystery, and the shoes and case buried under the concrete pointed to an obscure story where lost documents and time had obscured the answers. In the spring of 2025, the reconstruction plan was completed, and the road was partially closed. This sparked debate about whether, without a new excavation, the chances of solving the case were diminishing. The decision to partially close the old road in 2025 sparked protests from residents and journalists. They believed that without a full excavation, key evidence in the Takayuki case could be lost. In response to the protests, police conducted a final inspection of the limited section of the road, but no new findings were made. The structure of the additional concrete layer remained a mystery, and the work was concluded. A journalist covering the case organized a public campaign to preserve Takayuki's memory, calling on authorities to reconsider the road closure. The campaign drew a response, but the plans remained unchanged. The Ono family supported the campaign, expressing hope that even after decades, the truth will be revealed. They asked residents to share any memories, no matter how small. In the summer of 2025, the local museum announced the creation of a permanent exhibition about the case. The shoes and case became the centerpieces, a reminder of the unsolved mystery. The exhibition attracted tourists and cold case researchers. Many noted that the discovery under the concrete made the case unique in the history of Japanese investigations. Despite the controversy surrounding the road closure, police have digitized the case file, hoping that new technology or evidence will provide answers in the future. The journalist collected all the facts, testimony, and hypotheses, publishing a book about the case. It emphasized the loss of documents and the discovery of the shoes as key elements of the mystery. The book garnered widespread response, with some residents sharing memories of the 1970s, but no new evidence emerged that could advance the investigation. In the fall of 2025, police received an anonymous letter mentioning nighttime roadwork following the disappearance. The letter contained no details, and its authenticity was never confirmed. However, police compared the letter to other mentions of night work, but due to a lack of new information, it remained another unconfirmed story. The journalist, upon learning of the letter, tried to find the author, but to no avail. He speculated that the worker might have been afraid to reveal his role in unofficial work. At the end of 2025, the local newspaper published an article on the 49th anniversary of the disappearance, recalling the family's suffering and the mystery of the concrete layer. The article revived interest, and police received several calls from residents, but their stories were too vague or irrelevant, and the investigation made no progress. On the anniversary, the family laid flowers at the site of her disappearance, now overgrown with grass. They thanked everyone who kept Takayuki's memory alive, despite the changing landscape. That day, police conducted a symbolic inspection of the site, confirming that the road was rarely used and the tunnel abandoned. It was a farewell to the place of disappearance. In a new article, the journalist wrote that the case has gone beyond the scope of an investigation, becoming a symbol of the fight for truth and the preservation of memory. In early 2025, police announced that the case remained open, but without new evidence, active investigations were limited. This upset the family, but they made their decision. The museum collected oral histories from residents of the 1970s, preserving the context of the case. Some mentioned the road and tunnel, but no new information has emerged. The journalist and historians continued to study construction practices in the 1970s, confirming that unregistered work was common, but no connection to the case was proven. In mid-2025, police received information about a possible warehouse containing contractor documents, but the warehouse was destroyed in the 1990s and no records remained. The historian suggested that the filling of the layer could have covered up a minor incident, but without evidence, this was not connected to the case, leaving it as a hypothesis. Police last used new methods to analyze microparticles on the shoes, but only confirmed a connection with the road surface, and no new data emerged. The journalist met with the family to discuss the current state of the case. They wanted Takayuki's story to serve as a reminder of the importance of the truth, even without answers. In the fall of 2025, a local television channel aired a documentary highlighting the discovery of the shoes and case. It elicited sympathy and calls for a new investigation. After the film, police received reports of night work, but these were too general to be considered evidence, and the investigation made no progress. The museum added copies of newspaper articles and photographs of the road to the exhibition. This maintained interest, but no new evidence emerged. At the end of 2025, police conducted a final review of all case materials, including testimony, analysis, and maps. With no new findings or documents, the case remained unsolved. The family publicly thanked residents, asking them to remember Takayuki. They expressed hope that the truth would be revealed, despite the passage of decades. The journalist wrote in the article that Takayuki's case became part of the region's history, and the loss of documents and discovery under concrete made it a unique mystery. He added that the case revealed systemic record-keeping problems that may have concealed key evidence. At the beginning of 2025, the road and tunnel were officially declared abandoned, and their maintenance ceased. This removed the site of its disappearance from active use. The museum continued to collect personal accounts from residents, preserving the context of the case. Some mentioned the road, but no significant details were available. Police transferred the digital archive of the case to the regional cold case registry, ensuring access for future research or technology. The journalist began work on a new article, describing the case's impact on the region and society. He emphasized that the discovery of the shoes and case remains the most mysterious part. On the 49th anniversary of his disappearance in 2025, the family organized a memorial event, inviting residents and journalists. They asked for people to remember Takayuki. The event took place at the museum, where an exhibition about the case has become permanent. Visitors left flowers and notes expressing their sympathy for the family and their amazement at the concrete mystery. Police stated that day that the case remained open, but without new evidence, further action was impossible. This confirmed the investigation's impasse. In a speech at the event, the journalist emphasized that Takayuki's case is not only a tragedy, but also a lesson in the importance of preserving the truth and memory. In 2025, the museum published a booklet with key facts and photographs of the case. It became popular among tourists interested in the region's history. The family visited the sacred site annually, laying flowers and praying. This maintained their connection to Takayuki's memory. That year, police received several new reports from residents, but they repeated old stories or were rumors and did not advance the investigation. The journalist concluded the article by describing the case's impact on the region. He noted that the discovery of the shoes and case remains the most mysterious part of the story. The article received a response, and the case was discussed in the press again, but no new evidence or testimony emerged, and interest gradually faded. By the end of 2025, the road and tunnel were overgrown with grass, becoming part of the forest. The disappearance site became almost inaccessible, but the family continued to visit it. The museum made the case's digital archive available online, allowing researchers and the public to study the materials. This preserved Takayuki's memory. Police made a final examination of the remaining evidence, including the shoes and case, but found no new leads, and the case remained unsolved. On the 49th anniversary, the family thanked everyone for their support, asking them not to forget Takayuki, even without answers about his fate. In the final article, the journalist wrote that Takayuki Ono's case became a symbol of the fight for truth, remaining in memory despite the loss of evidence and time. Almost 50 years later, the case remained unsolved, and the shoes and case buried under the concrete kept the secret of the boy's fate in the silence of the rain and the old road.